Well, welcome, Jacob Swell. It's good to have you here. And yeah, kids, you're just welcome to this is the dry pavement. So just if kids want to come up here and wander around where I am, that's okay. Just let them go ahead and do that. Yeah, well, happy 4th of July. It's good to see you all here. I'm glad that the weather is cooperating. It's good to keep cooperating. I think I did my due diligence on that. I want to thank the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board for providing such a wonderful park for us and having the venue of the bandstand as a place to do this stuff. I got to thank Dominic and Adam, our sound techs. Yeah, and I just have to note that one of the very last people to speak at this location was President Barack Obama. Just saying, so anyway, so this is a great day to be here. I'm glad you're with us. I don't know if you have wandered over to see the falls, or if you've ever seen the falls. If you haven't seen the falls, make sure you do before you go, because sometimes by this time of year they're just a mere trickle, but I mean it's torrential right now. It's amazing. In fact, if anything, if those falls are anything, I would say they're awe-inspiring, awe-striking, which is what we're talking about. We are talking Awestruck, starting today and all the way through the month of July. Yeah, like I said, if those falls are anything, they're awe-inspiring. And then, what is it about all these awe-inspiring experiences that just kind of draw us in? Whether it's the stars when you get, in the middle of the night when you get far away from the sea and all the lights, or, if it's a beautiful sunset. And I think sunrises are equally beautiful. I just don't get around to seeing that many of those. But those sunsets, maybe it's paddling into a Boundary Waters lake, under the moonlight, or one of those gorgeous white pines. There's something about it, or looking at holding your baby in your arms. There's something about these awe-inspiring moments that just do something for us. When I think Awestruck, there's lots and lots of experiences that come to mind, but there's one that immediately, this is my Awestruck experience. All right, and I'll just share with you real quickly. I've had the pleasure of taking probably 150 to 200 high school kids down to the Arizona border, to Nogales, and they learn about border issues, and they find out what it's like to live in a favela in Mexico and stuff like that. And on our way home, we always stay in Flagstaff, Arizona, and then we get up super early in the morning and we get to the Grand Canyon for sunrise. Now, most of these high school kids haven't made it to the Grand Canyon yet. They've all heard about it, but they've never made it. What we do is we drive the bus to the parking lot, and we get everybody out. You're 50 yards from the edge of the south rim, but you can see nothing, right? You're just a bunch of pine trees in front of you. And so we get everybody out of the bus, and they get in a big line, and they link arms, and they close their eyes. And we walk them right to the edge. There's a railing, all right? We walk them right to the edge, and then we count 1, 2, 3. And they all open their eyes, and they all scream and jump backwards. And then they walk right back up to the rail. And they stand there, and they look, and they watch for as long as we'll let them do. I mean, you just can't take it in. You can't see enough pictures, you can't hear enough stories of what it's like to actually stand there and see the Grand Canyon right in front of your toes. Amazing. Awe-inspiring. Awe isn't anything new. It's something we've all experienced in many different ways, and I think the awe that we feel today is probably not very different. Even these circumstances aren't very different than the awe-inspiring experiences that people had, our ancestors had tens of thousands of years ago. Indeed, the writer of the Psalms, some 2,700 years ago, wrote these words. He wrote a psalm bristling with awe, including these lines. You probably recognize them from Psalm 8. When I look at your heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you've established, what are human beings that you're mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made us a little lower than yourself and crowned us with glory and honor. No matter what the time period is, when we experience awe, something happens to us. What's your experience of awe? Find someone next to you, someone you know, that's all right. Turn to someone and share, what is an awe-inspiring experience that you remember? Just real briefly. I'm going to just give you a minute. So find a person, share one of your awe-inspiring experiences, and re-feel it a little bit. Hey, for those of you who just hate it when we ask you to talk to someone else, I'll relieve you. For those of you who want to keep talking for another 10 minutes, I'm going to make you stop talking. I don't know why they are. Maybe some of you probably have like just little things that were awe-inspiring. Some of you saw these huge, dramatic things. It's all the same. It all comes out the same. If whatever it is, hopefully you're feeling some of that excitement again that you remember. And if you want to share your experiences with me, I'd love to hear your story. So track me down after the service and let me know. But scientists tell us that when we are awestruck, when we have that emotional response, there's certain things that happen to us. And I think you all know the feeling. First of all, they say that when we have these awe-inspiring experiences, our minds pump endorphins into our body. Endorphins are those brain chemicals that make you really happy, that just give you this overall sense of well-being. And unlike fear that happens, when you're suddenly surprised by something unpleasant, or maybe you're doing the thrill of the roller coaster ride, and those types of experiences, fear and that kind of thrill, they kick in what they call your sympathetic nervous system response. And that floods you with adrenaline, and it's the whole fight or flight kind of mode that you go into. That's not what happens with awe. Awe does the opposite by giving you the endorphins, and it triggers what they call the parasympathetic nervous response from us. And that is sort of our rest and digest. And what happens when we do that, when our parasympathetic system kicks in, our nervous system kicks in, what we do is we experience a sense of calm. We become relaxed. Sometimes you probably notice this, you become a little bit indifferent to time. It could be 1 minute or it could be an hour. You don't care. It's not that you don't know, you just really don't care. You breathe deeper, you breathe more slowly, your heart rate goes down, there's a sense of peace, sometimes kind of a little out of self, and maybe you feel more connected to what it is that you're experiencing the awe of, and you don't really feel that difference between you and it anymore. Also, one of the things that people report when they have an awe experience is that they have a sense of bond, or like a bubble around the other people that are experiencing it at the same time. And you might notice that you're a person who wouldn't ever talk to someone, but you get in those experiences and all of a sudden you start talking about what it is you're experiencing with those people. You don't need to know their names. You don't need to know where they're from. You're experiencing some other connection with them that's a lot deeper than those mere, biographical facts. And it's the awe that you're in the presence of. Then there's that perspective issue. Your sense of place in the world changes. You could call it humility happens when you're in the presence of awe. And you realize that maybe you're not such a big thing, and that you're in the presence of something that is so great. But the interesting thing about the humility that we experience with awe is that it doesn't diminish us. While it might make you smaller, or let me put it this way, while it might remind you how small you are, it also reminds you how connected you are. So there's a sense of being little and enormously big at the same time. Awe has that ability to do that to us. In fact, one of the things that people report from their awestruck experiences is a sense of connectedness, not just with the people around them, but with kind of like everything, with the cosmos. And they do that without smoking something, It's amazing. And finally, there's this openness, or kind of an insight that the world isn't quite like I always thought it was. Somehow, our status quo, this idea that I kind of got the world figured out, is cracked open when we have these awe-inspiring experiences. And guess what that does? That opens us up, at least for that moment, to the possibility of something new, which is pretty key to us. Now that's all looking at awe and being, awestruck from a very human, physiological perspective. And it's important to say, I have to say this as a pastor, and being a church here, I don't think that we have awe-inspiring experiences proves that there's a God. I don't think it does. I don't think, even though many people might say it does, what it proves is that we live in an awe-filled world. Note I'm working really hard to avoid the word awesome. So we live in a very awe-filled world, and we are programmed to experience awe and to want to repeat those awe-filled experiences. So why, as a community that understands God as the center of it, would we be spending 4 weeks talking about awe if it doesn't prove that God exists? Well, first of all, I don't think most of what churches talk about prove that God exists. In fact, I would go so far as to say there's nothing we can talk about that can prove God exists. That's kind of why we have faith, right? I mean, if we could prove God exists, hey, that'd be great. We could all go home. And that's an ongoing struggle. What we do discover when we start understanding how awe works in and among us and through us, we start discovering one of the things that is so intrinsic and so vital about being human. And then we start seeing, what does God have in mind by equipping us to have these kinds of experiences and being able to respond to them the way we do. So here's what I make of all this awe stuff, okay? Basically it's this. Number one, you were designed for awe. I was designed for awe. As human beings, we are programmed to experience awe. The fact that we respond to awe the way we do says that from an evolutionary perspective, awe is a survival factor. It's something essential. If we don't have it, we're missing something. It helps you learn from things that you normally would overlook. It creates bonds, it creates alliances, it inspires creativity, so essential to human beings and to our world. Sure, we can't do it all the time. You can't spend all your time being in awe. In fact, you shouldn't do it all the time. You know, for our ancestors, when the saber-toothed tiger attacked or when the truck is bearing down you on the road, fight or flight is a pretty darn good response. All right? And likewise, there are times when routine is just fine. You don't have to figure it out. Something you've done for 1,000 times, you're going to do it 1,000 times again. You know, put it this way. I'm not sure there's any real value in trying to be awestruck by emptying the dishwasher. You know? In fact, I'm a little scared about what it might mean that you are awestruck when you empty the dishwasher. But, you know, so that's not for us all the time. But nonetheless, the experience of awe is essential to becoming who we are supposed to become. Let me be more personal about it. Being awestruck is essential to you being who you are called to be in this world, to who I am called to be this time. All of us, I think, probably have room for slowing down a little bit more often in allowing ourselves to be available to be awestruck by this incredible world that is around us all the time. There is so much to learn. There is so much about humanity to love and to fall in love with rather than to start fights with. There are so many knock your socks off experiences and so many wonderful things that need to be created and thought of and written and discovered. And if we don't start opening our eyes, you and I and this entire world is missing out on something that is so full of possibilities that can be realized. Okay, so that's one thing. We were designed, we're programmed to be in awe. Another thing is that God wants us to be in awe. The first two books of the first two chapters in the Bible, the book of Genesis, chapter 1, chapter 2, are two creation stories, all right? They are not science, they are not history, they are records of the awe human beings have had in standing at the foot of a creation that they are overwhelmed with. That is the criteria, that is what they are writing about. And in those stories, we don't learn facts, we don't learn history, we don't learn science about how the world is put together. What we do is we experience the things that awe is intended to teach, the things that they were learning and caused them to write those two different stories. And that is these two things that awe always teaches. First of all, it teaches us about our relationships with other things. In fact, when you are in awe, your relationship with the world changes, fundamentally. That's why we try to hold on to that and not forget what we learned when we awe. That's one thing. The other thing that awe does is it makes us re-understand who we are in this world. It changes it. It makes me see myself from a bigger, a deeper, larger perspective. Maybe glimpsing my life and who I am from God's perspective. Let me repeat that because those are really important. Awe does these two things. It helps us re-understand our relationship with the world and helps us re-understand who we are in this world. That's big. So the Bible is full of experiences of awe. You know, I just mentioned Genesis chapters 1 and 2 are really just stories, poems, wonderful images of awe. I also talked about Psalm 8. And there are lots more Psalms, particularly in the book of Proverbs, that focus on awe. And if you're following our soap readings, and I think they're on your Sunday paper, you're going to be getting a whole bunch of those in the upcoming weeks. But think about Jesus. Think about Jesus as a character. So he's going along, he's teaching, and all of a sudden he says this, look at the lilies of the field. They don't work, they don't make clothing for themselves, yet at his very best, Solomon was never dressed as wonderfully as one of these. Now, here's my take on that. Jesus wasn't just coming up with an illustration. He was out there talking. He saw a field of flowers, and all of a sudden was just captivated by it. And all of a sudden, everything melted away. His worries about himself and what he's going to do and what his life was about, his worries about all the people that were gathered around him. And he was taken in this moment of awe and says, look at the lilies of the field. They don't worry. They don't worry about how they're clothed. But look at how beautiful they are. Don't you think our lives are as beautiful as that? He was filled with awe. And he was filled with a deeper, bigger perspective of who he was, more like God sees him and God sees us, and he was drawing us into that moment. Jesus not only had those awe experiences himself, but he also, that's how he experienced people over and over again. He would be with a crowd of people, and he would look at them, and he would see their lives, he would see their worries, he would see their situations. And the Bible tells us over and over that he was filled with compassion. The word compassion it comes from the gut. Actually, the root of the word is the same word as your guts, your innards. He's saying people, he saw people and he was moved inside. There was something happening. That's what that parasympathetic nervous system does to us. It gets everything working. It keeps us in that state where we are totally alive and in touch with who we are and what is going on around us. And Jesus was feeling connected with those people. He was feeling truly alive and in touch with the people that were around him. This other thing, Jesus also, people then experienced Jesus with awe. In fact, one of the most common things you read through the Gospels over and over, people come into the presence of Jesus, they see what he's doing, they hear what he's saying, and the Bible over and over says they were amazed at Jesus. Or another translation is they were astonished by Jesus. To me, those are all just synonyms of in awe of Jesus. Why? Because they just sat back and said, I have never seen, I have never experienced, I have never heard anything like this before. You were designed to be awestruck. God wants you to be awestruck. And there's a lot riding on our being awestruck and absorbing that and letting it change who we are and how we build this world around us. So, last thing, in the Bible, there's a lot of weight put on the idea of wisdom, the word wisdom. Wisdom. So important in the Bible. You may have noticed that the title for my message today is The Beginning of Wisdom. That wisdom is just thoroughly embedded in such a high goal in the entire Bible. In the Old Testament it's Hakma, in the New Testament it's Sophia. And there is this one line that comes up over and over. When the Bible has so many different things to say about wisdom, one thing it says that it always comes from the same place. You might be familiar with this verse. It says, awe of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Being in awe of God and what God has done is the beginning of wisdom. It's where it starts. It's where it comes from. It's where it's going to grow from. Now you might be saying, Greg, I know that verse, but doesn't it say the fear of the Lord? Well, that's a translation. I mean, a lot of times it is translated fear, but that's fear like the old sense of fear. Not being scared of something, but being in awe of something. Awe of God is the beginning of wisdom. So, my shorthand interpretation of that is, do you want to be wise? Do you want to know what's really going on in this world? Do you want your life to be filled with something more than just information? Do you want to have a glimpse of what God sees? Then be in awe. Be in awe of this marvelous, this complex, this intricate, this delicate, this strong, this beautiful world that we are part of. For God is in this. And there we find the beginning of wisdom. Awe is a good place to start. Join us this month as we take a look at where it happens and how we find it in the world. Would you pray with me? God, thank you that we can sense this awe. We don't quite know where it comes from. We understand maybe what happens in us and we experience it. But we just thank you that we can be part of a world that can be that amazing and touching. Whether it is those stars at night, or maybe we're lucky enough right now to be sitting next to someone we love and be feeling their hand and experiencing the awe of this thing that we call love that binds us together and helps us build lives together. We ask that you would use these experiences to lift us out of who we are every day, or lift us beyond our fears and help us to truly be the people we're called right here, right now, glimpsing this big picture of the world that you have in your mind all the time. Let that change us and help us